Every season for an NBA team has its own unique storylines. And I think last season for the Kings, it had a lot to do with leadership changes and especially getting rid of old leadership, firing Mike Brown, getting rid of De'Aaron Fox, who had been the face of the franchise for so long, and then finally at the end of the season, getting rid of the front office. The only leadership that really remained the same was the ownership. And so I think coming into this next season, I think the theme is going to remain the same. I think it's still going to be a theme of leadership, because when your team and your organization has been bad for 20 years or so, you probably have a problem with leadership. And now, of course, that starts at the very top, and the Kings didn't make a change at the very top. We know an owner cannot fire himself, or, well, only has the power to fire himself. And that's not going to happen with Vivek Ranadive. So you can only change the front office and the coach and the players. And so the Kings have done that. And so coming into this next season, the theme is going to be about establishing new leadership. Scott Perry and his leadership in the front office. Doug Christie coming into his first full season as an NBA head coach. And then you don't really have leadership among the players, right? Domantas Sabonis, I guess, is the face of the team right now, but you have a pretty big hole. And I mean, the Kings have always had questions revolving around who is the true leader of the team from the player perspective. So that's something that they need to figure out. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of predict what the storylines would be for this upcoming season. What are we going to be talking about once this NBA season starts? And so I've come up with 3 storylines that I think are really going to shape this season for the Kings. The first one really revolves around the young players versus the veteran players, because there are a lot of places in the Kings lineup where there are veteran players that right now seem like they're probably going to be in front of some of the younger players. And so how much do the Kings really prioritize getting some of these young players minutes and really developing them? I think that's going to tell us a lot about what the Kings organization is thinking. And some of that's going to come down to Doug Christie. Some of that is going to come down to the front office. And then, of course, some of that could come down to ownership if they decide to get involved. But it's going to be a big test for Doug Christie, and we're going to learn a lot about Doug Christie as a head coach very early on. At the guards, you have Devin Carter and Keon Ellis as young guards that you're hoping to develop and that need minutes. But then you have Zach LaVine and Dennis Schroeder probably as the starters, and Malik Monk off the bench kind of in the middle as a younger veteran player. Does Devin Carter get any minutes? How many minutes is Keon Ellis getting? He obviously deserves a ton of minutes, 25 minutes probably at least, but will he get that? I'm not so sure with, how many other players are there with him, and veteran players as well. And sometimes it can be hard to bench those veteran players just because they are veterans, even if it is for the good of the team, both in the short term and or the long term. I think you look at the closing lineup that the Kings are going to run, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the closing lineup is, because I think we know the starting lineup: Dennis Schroeder, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. But I think the closing lineup could change. Sure, that's probably the most likely lineup to be the closing lineup, but where does Keon fit in? Where does Malik Monk fit in? It doesn't really feel like Malik Monk fits in anywhere. I guess if you need a little bit more scoring punch and Dennis Schroeder isn't having a good game, you could put Monk in for Schroeder. But I think more likely you're going to see Keon possibly replace a player. And so if you need more defense, is Doug Christie going to be able to make the call, both from him kind of having the guts to and the leadership to, but also being allowed to by the higher ups? Because sometimes orders come down from front office or ownership that say, the coach can't, has to play certain players or can't do certain things. So is he going to have the freedom to, maybe put in a Keon Ellis into a closing lineup for a Dennis Schroeder, a Zach LaVine, a DeMar DeRozan, when Keon Ellis is getting paid $2 million and Zach LaVine's getting paid 40 whatever million, and DeMar, of course, is, a 6-time All-Star or whatever, and you just got Dennis Schroeder and he's making 14 million. And so do you have that leadership to be able to make the decision that is best for the team? Both, again, short term, it could help you having a guy like Keon Ellis in there at times, and long term, developing a guy like Keon Ellis who is 25 years old and hopefully part of the future of your team, whereas some of the other guys aren't. So, like I said, we're going to learn a lot about Doug Christie because he's going to have a lot on his plate and he's going to have to juggle the egos of, these players and be able to keep them happy and not lose the locker room while also doing what is best for the team. And sometimes that is benching more veteran players. And so it's not just the closing lineup as well. It's not just looking at where does Keon Ellis fit in. I mean, like I said, Devin Carter, where does he fit into the rotation, if at all? It's very hard to find a spot for him, but you would hope that you are trying to develop him. Then you look at the front court, and you're looking at Isaac Jones and Maxime Renault as the younger players there, versus Dario Saric and Drew Eubanks. Maybe Maxime Renault isn't necessarily ready to play yet, but I feel like Isaac Jones is. So do you play him over Dario Saric and sometimes Drew Eubanks? Do you give Maxime Renault any run at all to be able to develop him? Because that's really what the Kings should be doing, but are they going to do that? That's a big question mark for me. And then, of course, you look at Neat Clifford, and there isn't necessarily any direct competition at his position, but the Kings could always, play smaller because they have so many guards that they could play. And so he's going to be fighting for those minutes, and Neat Clifford is definitely a guy who you need to give minutes to this upcoming season. So the Kings should be giving these young guys minutes, and they should be developing them. And I think it's probably going to be short term what's best for the Kings as well. I think benching some of the veterans and playing some of these young guys is actually going to be better right away and make the team better next season. But will they actually do it? Because, one of the things that I hate the most is just when a veteran gets to play just because they are a veteran or just because they're making so much money. And it's not what's best for the team. And so that's really what Doug Christie is going to have to be juggling here. And I think that's going to be a huge talking point and storyline this season. Moving on to the second storyline, and it's one that comes a little later in the season, but it's the trade deadline mindset. The trade deadline is going to be big for the Kings because this offseason we didn't really see the organization pick a direction necessarily. And so this trade deadline is another opportunity to do that. It's another opportunity for Scott Perry to really show which direction he wants to push this team. Now, could we see nothing happen again and wait till the next offseason? Yeah, that's a possibility. But I would hope that there's some moves to be made at this trade deadline. And so the question is, are the Kings going to try to make a playoff push? If they're in 9th, 10th, 11th place, are they going to trade for some win now players that, try to help them, play a few more games into the postseason? Or are they going to be trying to get off of some salary? Maybe if certain guys are playing well, are they trying to capitalize on their value right now, gather picks in future drafts, free up that salary space to be able to extend guys like Keon Ellis or Keegan Murray, get young pieces in return for a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who can obviously go help a team right now. And I think the situations of Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray are big ones. Neither of them have been signed to extensions. So are you trying to sign them to extensions? I would hope so. I would hope you're trying to keep them around long term. If you're not, then you have to trade them at this trade deadline. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but we don't know. We've not seen too much from this front office, so we don't really know where their heads are at. I would hope the mindset at the trade deadline is to be able to get off of some more veteran salary. A DeMar DeRozan, a Malik Monk has been brought up in trade talks quite a lot this offseason, so I could see him getting traded at the trade deadline, freeing up salary space to be able to extend Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray. And so hopefully the mindset is to get off some of the older players, gather some picks, and build for the future. But we'll see. We'll see what that trade deadline mindset really is from this front office, and that's going to be a big storyline. And then the third and final storyline that I'm going to be watching for this Kings team coming into the season is, what is the team's on-court identity? And this definitely relates to the young players versus the veterans as well, and who is going to be playing is going to impact what the on-court identity is quite a lot. But when I'm looking at it, the biggest question I have in terms of what the Kings are doing and how they're playing on the court, it revolves around pace. Are they playing at a fast pace, or are they playing, more in the middle, towards the middle of the pack in the NBA? Or are they playing at a slower pace? And that has a lot to do with DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is a guy who likes to play at a slower pace. And so are the Kings going to try to fit around him? Or are they going to maybe phase him out and try to play at a faster pace? A pace that fits Domantas Sabonis and some of the younger players on the team. And not just the younger players, it also suits Zach LaVine playing in transition. Zach LaVine's interesting because he plays fast in transition, but then he plays slow in the half court, so he's kind of a mix there. But I think for most guys, and especially the young guys, it really would benefit to play at a fast pace. So being a kind of defensive first and then running in transition type of team and having that identity, I think that's what's going to be best for the Kings. But with the players that are going to be getting a lot of minutes, mainly focusing on DeMar DeRozan, is that going to be what the Kings actually do? I'm not so sure. And so again, this is another time where you're looking at Doug Christie, and I mean, you're also looking at Scott Perry. He's talked about identity all offseason. So I'm looking at these guys and I'm saying, what is your plan? Are you planning to really do what is probably best for the team? Or are you going to appease a veteran player like DeMar DeRozan? Are you going to play at a fast pace in the half court, which is going to be what's best for the team, revolving around Domantas Sabonis? We've already seen teams built playing at a very fast pace around Domantas Sabonis be very successful, obviously. So are we going to get back to that? Or are we going to appease a Zach LaVine, who just kind of wants to sit on the ball and isolate? You know, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are two of the best isolation scorers in the NBA, but that's not really what's going to be best for this team. At the end of the day, you have Zach LaVine and you have DeMar DeRozan. You are the Sacramento Bulls. We know this. So, you know, you could look at how the Bulls had success, which they did have success for a little bit with Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso being very good defensive guards and propping up that defense. And so Dennis Schroeder has to be your Lonzo Ball. Keegan Murray has to be your Alex Caruso, with Keon Ellis doing a little bit of that off the bench as well. Then you have DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. And Domantas Sabonis is your Vucevic. You know, there is a path to being a good team there. But I think when you're looking at it from a long-term perspective and from a developmental perspective, you need to be doing what's best for the younger players on this team and not the older players. So those are the three storylines that I'm really going to be watching. The big theme is leadership. And one more thing really is who's going to step up from a player perspective and really become a leader. And I've talked about Dennis Schroeder possibly being that guy, but other players could fill that void as well. So hopefully Scott Perry turns out to be a good leader in the front office position. Hopefully Doug Christie turns out to be a good leader from the head coach position. And you need a player to really take control and be a leader for this team. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. The storylines that I'm looking at: young players versus veterans, the trade deadline mindset, and the identity that this team is going to play with on the court. Those are the three for me. Let me know what storylines you think are going to pop up or what you're watching for this upcoming season. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.